Hey there, welcome back. It's Brad here with another adventure in beginning drawing. This is our a video about negative space from our week 1 exercises. And so, what is negative space? Basically, negative space is the emptiness, the nothing, the empty space around the tangible forms that you're drawing. Okay. I know it can get relative. Negative space is sort of relative, but I don't want you to get too philosophical about it right now. The main important thing is that we learn to start to see space, three-dimensional space, as shape, as two-dimensional shape. All right, and I've brought a good friend here today. Say hi to Mr. Chair, everyone. Okay, Mr. Chair is going to help us understand negative space, and so stay tuned and you'll find out. All right, so I have this photograph of this chair on my iPad, and I just going to do it this way just to illustrate a point, to help you guys see things from my perspective. So hopefully this helps. When you guys are drawing, I don't want you to draw from the screen necessarily. I'd like you to just pick an actual object, a three-dimensional object, and do this from life. So you're actually translating three-dimensional space and drawing three-dimensional space and turning that and translating that into two-dimensional shapes. So if you drew this, like you saw this chair, and you drew this hole that's in there, you'd end up with a shape like that. And that's what this is how your drawing of your negative space should look like. So as you go on, you fill in, you just see these holes, these enclosed spaces within the chair, and you just draw them and fill them in. So this is all you'd have to do for your assignment. That's what I want you to do for practice. You can, like I said, you can even break it down even more. Like you can see this as a shape, especially, this is easier if you have a viewfinder or you're working from a photograph or something that provides an edge. So you can see that as an edge. If you're not doing this and it's just like expanding, off in the distance, off into your peripheral vision, you probably won't do that because it's not an enclosed space. But basically, you can break this down into just to see all these things as the space as shapes. All right, and so here's our chair. Now, if you're going to draw your chair, I don't ever recommend in normal drawing just to start off by drawing the negative space, just because you can draw the negative space just as easily as you can misdraw the positive space. It's important, to draw the positive space, but what's important is that you check the negative space. So as you're drawing that, you just consider this. So if I'm sketching this out, I kind of sketch out the top part of the seat. I maybe draw like the chairs, how long down do they go? I might check the angles, kind of in there. But then I would probably at some point want to just look really objectively, and I might even do a blind contour around those shapes, just to kind of check to make sure that they're there. Because I'm like, okay, there's a shape here, there's that shape. Because what happens is when you start, drawing from three-dimensional objects, not drawing from a screen, like a flat screen like this, you end up get a little bit of distortion. So like these chairs, they can kind of look pretty similar, but they're taken from slightly different angles. It's easier to see when they're side by side like this, but if you're just, sitting up, drawing it, slight movements of your head, you're going to get a view like this sometimes and a view like this sometimes. And the problem is that sometimes, it's like you're drawing it from here and you do a little shift, in your head. If you move it around, you're not, disciplined enough to keep your head more still, that happens to all of us. And it's actually one of the great things about drawing, but, get a little bit of that natural distortion in there. But if you get too much, things start to look a little bit off. It almost looks like a Picasso drawing, like where it's multiple perspectives, like cubism. But here you can kind of just see like, well, this back part, if you can see the back part of that leg, you can see it here. Well, in this drawing, you can't even see it. It's hidden back here. So if you were to draw the shapes that you see in here, that would help you draw the positive. So here's our friend Mr. Chair here. And again, I just wanted to kind of show you guys this. that you want to keep your head still when you're drawing. So if you kind of like look down your paper and then look up, um, you want to do that more with your eyes um, than with your head. Because if you start kind of bobbling your head, you start, see, like, that's kind of funny. It changes the shape. You're like, well, the chair hasn't changed that much, you know? Well, it has. We just don't notice it because when we look at the positive, we've labeled it chair. When we look at the negative space, we just see that as shape. And that's where you really want to be with drawing. So where you're not labeling stuff. And it's kind of switching over from drawing, you know, from the left side of your brain, which is like labeling things, to drawing with the right side of your brain, which is dealing with more spatial issues. And that's where you want to be when you're drawing. So like you can see this, like if this is our drawing, like draw the positive shape, but then the negative space, you know, consider those things. Because if you just like move up just a little bit, like you're like, oh, my posture is bad, and you finally sit up, well, that shape is gone. And every other shape has changed. You're like, well, I didn't see it change. Well, it was very subtle, but you want to capture those subtle things, those little minor changes when you're drawing, okay? So I just wanted to kind of show you that just a little change. The chair still looks pretty much the same, you know, because that's when you're looking at it kind of with your left brain. But when you're looking at it with your right brain, you're like, oh, those angles and everything are changing quite a bit, all right? So the negative space is really helpful in, one, teaching us to keep our head still. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If not, please let me know, message me, email me. You can leave a comment below, and I'll try to get back to those as soon as possible. You know, try this example. Try to draw this from direct observation. So pick a three-dimensional object, you know, and actually draw that three-dimensional object. So that way you're practicing drawing, translating three-dimensional space into two-dimensional shape. All right, that's really important. And it will help you learn to keep your head still instead of like kind of bobbing up and down and around. That happens in drawing, but you always want to try to get back into that same, you know, position, that same perspective to your object so that it really prevents distortion from happening. And I think that's what plagues a lot of beginners. They don't even know, like, I'm just drawing what I see. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's perfect. But you're seeing things like from here and from here and from down here. And that's why you kind of end up with those cubist sort of, you know, Picasso drawings sometimes. So just, you know, keep your head still. I think that'll help. And then learning how to see that shape, three-dimensional space as shape, and just to see things as shape in general, instead of like when you see a chair, you don't just say, oh, a chair, I know what chair looks like. That's on your left side of your brain kind of thinking. And you want to get onto the right side of your brain and see, and which deals with things that are more like spatial instead of just labeling something. Because when you draw like just on your left side of your brain and you're labeling things, you are it's like your brain kind of takes over, and it's like, oh, well, I know what this looks like, or I know what it should look like. And really, our brains are kind of faulty, our memories are faulty, and how we picture things aren't always like super realistic, or at least how we see them from that very specific perspective. So it's important to trust our eyes and to draw what we see. All right? So when you do that and you learn to see space as shape and you keep your head still, you are on your way to some awesome drawings, okay? I promise you. So keep practicing this. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, let's move on to our next project. All right, take care, guys. Bye.